Hello everyone and welcome to another YouTube video. In this video I'll be showing you all what I believe to be the best game of my chess career. This game was played at the Isle of Man 2016 and I played none other than Hikaru Nakamura with the black pieces. And it's actually crazy to think that at that time Hikaru did not stream yet. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump right in and have a look at the game. So, as I said, I was playing with the black pieces and Hikaru started things off with the move 1d4. I played the move knight f6, Hikaru played c4 and I played g6. And here white's main move is the move knight to c3. With the move knight c3, white is preparing the move e4 and black can do two things here. He can either play the move bishop g7, allowing white to play e4, and this is called the King's Indian. Black can also play the move d5 here, stopping e4, because now I cover the square twice. And this is called the Grunfeld defense, which is what I was going to play if Hikaru played the move knight to c3. And here white's main move is to capture, black recaptures, white plays e4, black takes on c3, and this is the starting position of the Grunfeld. White has a big center, but black is eventually going to attack it with moves like bishop g7 and pawn to c5, knight to c6, and there's a lot of theory involved. Anyway, let's go back. And instead of the move knight c3, Hikaru played the move f3. With the move f3, Hikaru is also preparing the move e4. And the difference is here, if black plays d5, white's going to capture. And if black recaptures, white plays e4. Hitting the knight, and now there's no knight to capture on c3. So black would have to retreat, and white argues that this move f3 is beneficial for his position, and he continues developing with moves like knight c3 and bishop e3. And then queen e2 and long castles eventually. But instead of the move d5, I chose a completely different approach. I played the move e6, and this move might look a little strange at first, but we will see the idea shortly. Hikaru played e4 and I played the move c5, challenging white's center. Hikaru played d5 and I played d6, and now we transpose into some sort of Ben-Oni structure where eventually I'm going to take on d5, white's going to recapture, and this is called the Ben-Oni structure, where white is the pawn on e4 and black is the pawns on d6 and c5. Hikaru plays knight e2, I play bishop g7, and Hikaru plays knight e to c3. I play a6. My idea is that if white continues development here with a move like bishop e2, is that I want to take, and if recaptures, want to play b5, gaining space on the queen side. So to prevent that, Hikaru played the move a4, clamping down on the b5 square. And this is also the idea of white's setup. Like, eventually white wants to play knight a3 to make sure that black can basically never achieve the b5 push. But I had different ideas. I played the move knight h5. And with the move knight h5, I'm threatening the move queen to h4. And the point is here, if white plays a move like g4, hitting my knight, I give a check. White can move the king over and I go knight g3, hitting the rook on h1. And if white takes, now I can take the rook on h1, I'm up in exchange, and black is winning here. And the point is that I've delayed the capture on d5. Because if I would take on d5 in this position, recaptures and knight h5, white can play the move g4 in this position. Because if I give a check, king d2 and knight g3, here the difference is that white can take, and if I take the rook on h1, white has a check on b5. Checking the king, and if I take, white's gonna take my queen on h1, and white is winning. Which is why I delayed the capture, to make sure that this diagonal was blocked. So let's go back. So after knight h5, Hikaru played bishop e3. So if I give a check now on h4, he can just block with the bishop. So instead I took a d5, white recaptures, and I played the move f5. Hikaru takes, I recapture. Played queen e2, I castle, bishop e2, and I play knight d7. Just continuing my development. Hikaru castled, and I played the move f4. And f4 is a double-edged move. On the one hand, it gives my knight on e5 a nice outpost. On the other hand, white also gets a outpost on the e4 square, because I cannot challenge that square anymore. I've advanced my f pawn too far, and my and my d-pawn is blocked by white's d-pawn. So Hikaru played bishop f2, I played queen g5, bringing more pieces towards his king. And he played g4, which is understandable. It looks weakening, but it has some merit to it. If you would continue with the move knight to e4, I would just stab the queen back, and let's say we go knight b to c3. This would be the normal way to continue. I would play the move knight e5. And once again, this knight on e5 can never be challenged by any of white's pawns. White cannot play f4, and his d-pawn is already on d5, so can never play pawn on d4, which is why we call d5 square an outpost. And black threatens to play bishop h3, putting pressure on the g2 point. So I would have to move the king over, but after bishop f5 followed by rook a8, black has a very comfortable game. Which is why Hikaru played the move g4, to try to gain more space on the king side. I'll play knight e5, king h1. Now my knight is hanging, because there's no more king on g1, so I move the knight back. And Hikaru played rook to g1, to make sure that it's, to defend his king side a bit more. And here I played the move queen g6, which looks like a weird move, like what exactly is it doing? But it was actually one of the best moves of the game. And later on Hikaru praised it in an interview. And we will see the idea shortly. If white would continue here with a normal move like knight a3, here black can strike with the move bishop takes g4. If white decides to take my bishop, I have knight e4, hitting the queen and the bishop. If white decides to take my knight, I can recapture with the queen, giving a check. White has to block with the rook, and now I have f3, hitting the rook and the bishop. White can take, but after recaptures, black regains, black restores the material balance, and white's king is very weak. White has no coordination whatsoever, and black's attack just rages on. So, white cannot take the bishop. Now white can play queen d1, defending the f3 point. However, here black plays the move b5. And believe it or not, white's pieces here are overloaded. If white decides to take, black recaptures. If white takes on g4, I have to move b4, pinning both the knights and keeping all my ideas like knight e4 in a position. And if white decides to take with the a knight, here I take the rook on a1, deflecting the queen, because now I can take on f3. The queen is no longer protecting this square, and black's attack crashes through. At the same time, if white decides to take with the knight on c3, now I have knight e4, because this knight is no longer protecting the e4 square. And if white takes, I take with the queen, giving a check. White has to block, and once again f3. Hitting the rook, hitting the bishop, and white's position is just collapsing here. So Hikaru realized that he couldn't play the natural move knight a3, and he played the move bishop h4, which was actually the best move to stay in the game. I played h5, putting more pressure on his king side. Played g5, kicking my knight, and well, I mean, I can go back, but it looks a bit passive. So in such positions, there's just, you can only go forward. I played the move knight f to g4, and this move might look a bit crazy. But if white decides to take my knight, I'm just going to recapture. And white lacks any sort of coordination here. If white would play a move like queen d1, I would just play queen h7, hitting the bishop. And if the bishop were to move, let's say to f2, I have g3, hitting the pawn on h2. And once again, I'm going to regain the material here, and my attack just continues. So instead of taking the knight, Hikaru played the move knight to e4, and I played bishop f5, just bringing more pieces into the game and increasing the pressure. And here, uncharacteristically for Hikaru, he made a blunder. He should have just played the move knight b to c3, defending the knight on e4, which is also what he said after the game. And he added that black should still be better, but the game is of course very complicated, and it could have easily gone either way. Instead, he gave a check on f6 with the knight, but here I found a tactic. I took the knight with the rook. Now white had to recapture, and I take with the bishop. So I'm attacking the bishop on f6. and it's also easy for white to actually deal with that. If white decides to take my bishop, I have knight f2 checkmate. I've removed the defender of the f2 square. If white decides to drop the bishop back to e1, well, then the bishop is blocking this line of the rook and I can pick up the knight on b1, because it's defended by my queen. And if white decides to play a move like queen e1, I can play knight takes f3, bishop takes f3 and rook e8, hitting the queen, and if the queen were to move, then this bishop is hanging again, bringing knight f2 into the position. And I know this might seem all very complicated, but these are the sort of lines I had to find in order to bring Hikaru to the edge. So instead of all that, Hikaru played the move knight to c3. I took the bishop and he played rook af1, defending the f2 square. Now, if you were to capture my knight here, I would give a check, and he would have to take. I take, rook g2, and I play f3. Once again, forking the rook and the bishop. And if white takes, I take. I'm on material, I still have an attack, so black's winning here. Which is why Hikaru played the move rook a to f1, and I played bishop g5. Now once again, white cannot take the knight on g4. If he decides to take the knight, I once again give a check. White takes, I take. We check, white has to block, and now I take, sacrificing my queen, and I play f3. Giving a check, white has to take, and I take the queen on d2. Black has won 2 minor pieces in an endgame. This is just completely winning. So instead of that, Hikaru played the move h4, hitting my bishop. I dropped the bishop back, and now he decided to take the knight on g4. And here the difference is that if I give a check on e4, white can take, I take, and white has king h2. He created the square by pushing up the h-pawn, and now there's no like f3 tactic, because that we just hang the bishop. So instead of that, I just recaptured, and for the moment I am down in exchange for 2 pawns though, but now look at white's king. Actually, let's highlight this as a red square. Since he's pushed up the h4 pawn, his king has become extremely weak. So Hikaru took an f4, I play queen h5. There's no need to give up the pin yet, because I mean this rook can never move. White played rook g2, I took the pawn, king g1, and here there were a lot of wins in the position, but I decided to just calculate one line and to stick with it. So I played knight g6, attacking the rook. Hikaru took the bishop on f5, and I take the queen. And here he took on g4. So it looks like things could get a bit messy. I mean, he's attacking my queen, he's attacking the knight. And around this time we're both getting a bit low on time. And the move I chose was not necessarily the best, but it simplified the position a lot. I took the knight on c3, and this might look quite surprising, like why would I leave my queen hanging? But if white decides to take, I recapture, hitting the rook on f5, and if he gives a check on g5, I can just block with the bishop. And I'm up a knight and a pawn, so I should trust myself to win this position. So, and if white decides to take the knight, I don't play king h7, because that allows rook h5, winning back the queen. But instead I would block with the bishop. And once again, I'm up a queen for a rook, so black is completely winning here. So instead Hikaru just took the bishop. I gave a check on e1 and hit the bishop, so Hikaru played bishop f1. I played king g7, defending the knight. Hikaru played rook fg5, and I played the move queen to b1, defending the knight from afar while keeping the bishop pinned at the same time. And at this moment Hikaru resigned. Truly a special moment in my career, because at that time Hikaru was rated number 7 in classical chess. It's the only game I've ever won against a top 10 player with the black pieces in such a attacking game. Basically the style Hikaru is known for, especially when he was younger. So yeah, definitely a very special game to my heart. Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the game, and I'll see you all in the next one.